Let us take a moment to reflect on the fact that it is because of the Supremely Enlightened One, the Perfect One, the Omniscient One, our Master, the Lord Buddha, that we have the gift of Dhamma today. Bearing that in mind, let us all take a moment to pay homage to the Lord Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay. So, there are several of you in the room, and I think there are several others who are listening online. And today we are attempting to do something we've not done before. To contemplate on the Dhamma, because meditation has lots of connotations which people have really misunderstood what meditation is nowadays. A lot of people don't know what meditation is. They have their interpretations of what meditation is, and sometimes people get lost. And that's such a shame. Meditation did exist even before the time of the Buddha. So it's not the Buddha's invention. And people did all sorts of things in the name of meditation. But as I have been reminding you, in preparation for today, we are not going to be doing a guided recitation program. It's guided meditation. So it's not a case of I say and you repeat. That's not what we're trying to do. And if you have been coming along to sermons regularly, and if you have, as I asked you to, gone back and listen to the previous programs, then you will know what it is we are about to do today. So hopefully you will not require a huge introduction to what we are about to do. Having said that, there are a few things I think that is worth reminding ourselves. So the first thing is, now let's be honest with ourselves here. There is the odd lady or gentleman in the audience, and also perhaps online, who has trouble keeping their eyes open even in the middle of a sermon. Because I can see all of you from where I'm sat. This vantage point is a perfect one to observe all of you. So through the course of today's session, I'm not going to be doing a lot of talking. So it's going to be even more challenging to overcome that obstacle. We must understand that we are not here to just while away the hours. We're not here just to pass away the hours, right? We are here for a purpose. So please be honest to yourselves. Don't delude yourselves. Self-delusion isn't going to get you anywhere. If ever you feel you're starting to doze off, then please do something about it. We are not animals, we are human beings, so we can act with intelligence and intellect. So we can do something about it. So if you're starting to feel a little bit sleepy, then you may have some water with you. Maybe just sprinkle some water on your face, just to waken you up. If that fails, then stand up. You're free to do all of this. This is why I'm saying this right at the beginning. And if that is still not working, then maybe walk. There's plenty of room here, at the back, on the sides. Please feel free to get up and walk. And that's all perfectly fine. Because our aim, this is not a sleeping competition. Who sleeps first? That's not what we are trying to find. This is about trying to find the time so that you can reflect on all the Dhamma that we've been discussing. Ultimately, that is what meditation is. We are trying to give you the time because in the midst of your busy chores and your busy schedules and duties and responsibilities in your lay lives, it can be quite tough and challenging to find some time where you can sit down and reflect on the Dhamma. So this is why, because you have already, and your family, your relations, those people who set expectations on you, have accepted that Sunday afternoons you're already occupied, right? So they know you're preoccupied on a Sunday afternoon. So now they can't come back to you with any excuses for interrupting you because you're here. So we are going to be using this time to reflect on the Dhamma that you have been listening to, practicing in preparation for this day. Now I know there are some of you who have come along to the Sinhala programs as well, and that is great. So you'll have some people in the audience who will have had some practice with this. There'll also be novice practitioners, and that's perfectly fine. But we're going to start from the basics because this is not a race. And if there's anyone who feels, oh, I've done that before, then quite frankly, you're not suitable to even be here. So we must learn to put our ego to a side and focus on trying to achieve what we need to do. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I want you all to be realistic. I don't know what expectations you might have for this session. I don't expect any of you to start levitating, so no pressure there. Don't feel you have to, just in case. I don't expect any of you to start emanating radiant colors, so no expectation there. It's okay if it doesn't happen. Because all we are trying to do is reflect on the Dhamma. All we are trying to do is cleanse our minds, really. There are defilements that have entangled our minds. And this is nothing but a process of cleansing the mind. It's like throwing your mind into a washing machine. This is what we're trying to do here. So it's going through a spin cycle, a wash cycle, a detergent washing cycle, right? And it comes out clean fabric. Sometimes you might have to wash it several times before it's clean, because some stains are quite strong. They don't come off that easily. So for someone who's got a heavily soiled mind, like all of us, it takes a long time to clean. But we've all got to start somewhere. And that is what we are about to do. So don't expect to see flashes of light, blue lights, red lights, flashes. And I'll tell you right off the bat, if you start seeing flashes of light, there's only one thing you need to do: open your eyes. Because you're off track. Come back to reality. Wake up. You're probably dozing. You're probably falling asleep. Just wake up, open your eyes. Sometimes these things might happen. This is why I'm forewarning you. You might have your eyes closed, and now for a little while you start to see flashes of blue, red, yellow, and then they all start mixing together in the middle, like yin yang forming in front of you. Wow, I'm really enlightened now. No, you're not enlightening, you're insane. You're heading the wrong direction. So that's not what we want. If you're starting to see flashes of light, just open your eyes. It's probably just this. So if you start falling asleep, open your eyes. If you start to see flashes of light, open your eyes. Some people start hearing voices in the back of their heads. All sorts of voices. Don't worry, that's not your ancestors trying to talk to you. It's not extraterrestrial beings trying to communicate with the human race. I'll guarantee they're not going to pick you, don't worry. If you start to hear voices, just open your eyes. If that fails, just slap yourself, and then you'll be back to normal. So, second bit of advice. Last piece of advice. The more you do this, the more humble you have to become. The more down to earth you have to become. We're not about showing off. We never were, we aren't, and we never will be. So I don't want any of you, after having come along to these sessions, to start going around telling people, hey, you know what, I'm now meditating. This is not what this is about, because then you're not following the Buddha's teaching. We are in a hospital. When was the last time you bragged about being in a hospital? When was the last time you bragged about going to the doctor for an insulin injection? We are all in a hospital for treatment. We are all infected with raga, desha, moha. So we've come to see the doctor. He's given us a prescription, and all we are doing is taking our medication in the hope that we can all cure ourselves as soon as possible. This doesn't give us any of us bragging rights. We should really be ashamed of ourselves. The fact that we have to do this, we should be ashamed. The fact that I have to preach to you, I'm ashamed. The fact that I'm sat here right now, I'm ashamed of that. Because it goes to say that I didn't get what I had to get done in my previous births. I left it undone. And therefore I'm here again, trying to do what I should have done a very, very long time ago. So this is not an activity to boast about. The more the Dhamma becomes part of your life, the more humble you will become. And that humbleness also is not something to show off. Sometimes people show off their humility, their humbleness. Have to be very careful how ego gets the better of you. This happens. So if you're aware of how your mind works, you will notice sometimes your mind will start saying these things. Go and show that you're humble. You will show your humility in the presence of others. You'll go wash the toilets. You'll do all the dirty jobs, provided someone's there to watch you doing it. Why? So you can score points. That's not humility. That's showing off. Be very careful. We all have this problem. For as long as there's ego in our minds, there's mana in our minds, it will try to get the better of you. Don't succumb. Don't give in. This is why I always say the best thing to do is be arrogant with ego. Whenever ego says something, do the opposite of that. Whatever it is. It might be something that is acceptable as a good thing, that generally society sees as a good thing. Still, if it's ego that's telling you to do it, do the opposite. Because chances are ego's trying to get you to do it in the hope of fostering your ego even more, feeding your ego. And that's not going to get you to Nibbana. So, why am I saying this now? Because you've been coming along to sermons for a long time, and now you're in a privileged position where you're then going to be doing this meditation program, and if this works out, we'll probably be doing it once every month. But I don't want anyone going out there and boasting about it to your friends, to your relatives, that I'm now meditating. I'm going to an English meditation program. These are things that we use to boast, brag about ourselves. I listen to English sermons. Whatever, this is the ego. Whatever ego can hold on to, it will. So be very careful. So those are my 3 bits of advice before we begin. I think this is nothing new. For those of you who've come along to previous meditation programs, you will have heard Guru Swami Maharaj say this. So ultimately the reason I'm sharing this advice with you is only because I want you to get the most out of your time. I want you all to leave a better person than you came here. I want you all to move 1 step closer, just 1 inch closer to Nibbana with every time you come to the monastery. Every time we meet each other, I want you to move 1 step closer to Nibbana. Every time we have a chat, every time I talk to you, both you and I, we must move 1 step closer to Nibbana. If we are moving the opposite direction, then that association has to stop. Yes or no? If every time you see me, every time I talk to you, you are moving 1 step away from Nibbana, then this is not a wholesome association. You must stop it immediately. It's not helping you. You should not come to see me again. Right. We don't have a great deal of time. This is going to be one of the challenges that we have. For those of you who've come along to the weekly programs, and we give the feedback form, you usually tick it's on the 3rd or the 4th day that you start to be able to contemplate on the Dhamma. So we don't have 3 or 4 days. We are trying to do this in a matter of hours. This is why I'm going through stuff as quickly as we possibly can. But I think it's worthwhile just to very quickly do a whistle-stop tour on the Nyaya Dhamma, the doctrine, the fundamental doctrine, which is what we're going to be reflecting on initially. What we practice here, you must practice at home. Because this is only me showing you or giving you some instruction on what you ought to be practicing at home. Don't think that just because you come here and you do your meditation here, you're going to be able to achieve Nibbana. It's not that easy. It's not that difficult, but it's not that easy either. So you have to practice what you practice here at home. So let's go over the doctrine very quickly, and then this is what we're going to be reflecting on in the first phase of today's session. So, as we know, we, all human beings, and all sentient beings, we go through existence. Living, we know we are alive because we can see things, we can hear things, we can smell, taste and touch things, and we can think about things through our mind. So our 5 senses coupled with the mind help us to perceive that we are alive. If none of you can see, hear, smell, touch, taste or think, then you would fail the test of am I alive? So this is what living is about. But all these sensations, they come to us through our 5 senses, and once they hit the brain, which is the controlling center for all these sensory inputs, the brain does this magnificent job of translating those inputs into Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana, and passing them down to the mind. So Rupa being the material or the sense impressions, you have Rupa Rupa, Shabda Rupa, Gandha Rupa, Rasa Rupa, Pottabha Rupa and Dhamma Rupa. So Rupa Rupa is a sense impression if that sense input came from the eye. Shabda Rupa is a sense impression that came from the ear, and so on and so forth. It's like taking a photograph. If I took a photograph of you right now and I gave you the printout and I ask you, is that you? I'm pointing at the picture. The answer is going to be yes and no at the same time, right? You're going to say yes. So how come you're there and here at the same time? Then I'm going to ask. Well, then you're going to say, no, it's not me. I thought you just said it is you. So that is what a sense impression is. It's not the same thing, but it's not different either. It's like a photograph of what you see in the outside world that the mind takes in. This kicks off the process. So when you have a Rupa Rupa, Shabda Rupa, Gandha Rupa, Rasa Rupa, Pottabha Rupa, which is the sense impression that comes through touch, Then you have Vedana, Sanya, Sankara and Vijnana arising in the mind itself. It's only the Rupa that comes from the outside. The rest of it is created in the mind itself. So Vedana is the sensation. It's knowing that your inputs or your senses have been triggered. It's like if you imagine an octopus with its arms, tentacles. If one of those tentacles is triggered, now the octopus knows which direction its prey is coming from. So it then turns its attention to that side. So likewise, the mind knows, because of Vedana, where this sense impression has come from, whether it's come from the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, or touch, and so on. So that's Vedana. Then you have Sanya. This is the way you identify. This is how you recognize what you have just seen. So I can see you right now. You can see me right now. You can see all of this stuff. You give these things names, right? Flower, clock, remote, bottle, AC, fan, person, man, woman, white man, black man, right? These are all Sanya. Recognition. To recognize, basically recognition is recognition. So to recognize, basically what you're doing is you're going back into your memory. Have I seen this thing before? Have I heard this before? Have I tasted this, smelled this before? What was the name I gave to this? Because when we have a name, now it's easy to identify them. So when I say, for example, chocolate, right? Is it just the sight of chocolate that comes to you? Why, what about the sound, smell, taste, and touch? All of these things come rushing back to you, but all I needed was one name. It's like on a database. You have your index, right? You have the index number and the rest of the data comes right straight through. So that's how Vedana Sanya works. Then there's Sankara. So Sankara is it's the verbs that you associate, the doing things that you associate with whichever Rupa, Shabda, Gandha, Rasa, Sparsha that came your way. So again, if I say chocolate, what verb comes to mind? Eat. Bathe? No, but back in those days, I think people used to do that. In the time of the Romans, they melted chocolate and people used to bathe in chocolate. I think it's a treatment they give in spas and things like that. Not that I've ever experienced it, but I've heard. Apparently people do that kind of thing. Bathe in chocolate. So now if I say chocolate, you have two verbs associated with it. One is eat, one is bathe. Then you have dipping chocolate. You can dip your marshmallows, your strawberries, right? So all those things. But these are all the verbs that you associate with it. If I say gun, what verb comes to mind? Shoot. What about sweep the house? No, because that's not a sankara that is associated with the sanya gun. So with the sanya, associated with that sanya, with that recognition, with that ID, you have several verbs. And these are the verbs that come to mind as sankara. And this happens even to an arahant. If I say the word microphone to an arahant, he's not going to wonder, oh, what do you do with a microphone? If he knows what a microphone is used for, then that memory comes flashing back to him. So, in that sense, it's okay. There's not a problem. If I say the word mic and you say speak or amplify, there's nothing wrong with that. But if I say mic, I'm not talking about Michael mic, I'm talking about this mic. If I say mic and sensual feelings come to mind, now there's something wrong with that. Because that is something you've created in your own mind. That does not exist for real in the real world. So I say woman or man. Sensuality comes to mind. There's something wrong with that. Because those are things that people create in their mind. Sensuality is a fabrication of the mind. It's not something that exists for real. So we'll talk about some of these things later on. So, Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, then finally you have Vijnana. Vijnana is a conscience, the job of which is to amalgamate all of these other aggregates, the Rupa, the Vedana, the Sanya, the Sankara, and then finally perceive it as being this object that is able to do this, and this is the name I give it, and I have just seen it. I have just heard it, I have just smelt it, and so on and so forth. So that is what vijnana does. It's kind of the bringing all of that together. So no matter what we've done in all our lives, really all we've really done is taken Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. We've done nothing else in our lives. I say flower, birds, bees, trees, star, moon, planets, sky. No matter what I say, ultimately the only way you have ever perceived any of these things is through Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. And the reason for that is because the mind is not able to perceive anything else. The mind only speaks that language. The language of the 5 aggregates. This is the only language the mind speaks. So there's only 5 words in the language that mind speaks, and that's Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. You talk to the mind in any other word, it's not going to understand. So when the brain says, I've just seen something, the mind says, what's that in 5 aggregate? Talk, speech. So now the brain has to do the job of translating that. It's like if you go on holiday somewhere and someone starts to speak in some language you don't understand, you say, what's that in English? You see a board, what's that in Sinhala? Or what's that in English? So someone who knows both languages has to translate it for you, right? So brain is able to do both. It speaks the language of the eye, it also speaks the language of the mind. So now the brain is a really good translator because it can translate this live. It's translating it live. On the fly, it's translating this. This is why your mind can perceive things. But it's not the brain that attaches to the outside, to the world. It's the mind that attaches to the world. And it's the mind that only perceives Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. So, what we are going to do then is for the first session, the first phase of our program, is I want you to reflect on some experiences in life. You don't have to think so hard to come up with experiences, even the experiences you have right now. The fact that you can see something right now, or the fact that you can feel there's a cushion underneath you, or you're sat on a chair, or your feet touching the floor, whatever. Either that, or some experiences you really have had in your life. Maybe you've had your birthday recently, or maybe it's the new year. Maybe you met a friend recently, or you went to work, you were gardening just before you came here, whatever, or some sight you might have seen on your way here. Whatever it might have been, I want you to see it in terms of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. I want you to not rather see it, I want you to reflect on it in those terms. Because ultimately that's all it is. So I want you to perceive how the mind perceives the world. Does that make sense? I want you all to reflect on how the mind perceives the world that we live in. Like when I say, can you perceive how a little child sees the world? Then you go into that child's world. Oh, this is how they might perceive. You get into the shoes of the child, right? Get into somebody else's shoes. We do that all the time, right? So I want you to now to get into the shoes of the mind. Get into the mind's shoes and think about how the mind perceives the world. And that's nothing other than Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. So if, for instance, if it's a flower, I want you to reflect on what the Rupa bit is about this. So of course, there's a Rupa. If you went and tapped the petals or maybe the leaves or whatever, now you're going to get Shabda Rupa. Of course, if you smell the flower, you're going to get Gandha Rupa. If you licked it, there's going to be Rasa Rupa. And if you touch it, Sparsha Rupa. And when I say flower, all these things come together. That's your Dhamma Rupa. Right? So Rupa, Vedana, the fact that you have seen the flower, the mind knows that I have now seen this. That's the Vedana. So Vedana comes for Rupa, Shabda, Gandha, Rasa, Sparsha as well. All these sensory inputs. The mind knows, yes, I've just seen it, I've just heard it, I've just smelt it, the mind's always going on about it. Even as I'm talking, if there's a sound coming from somewhere, I've just heard something, I've just seen something, I've just smelled something. The mind's always doing this. This is all Vedana. And the Sanya, of course, is the flower. And even the flower, this is the sight of the flower, the smell of the flower, the taste of the flower. These are all Sanya. This is how, if I were to blindfold you and hold a bottle of perfume and spray some, maybe jasmine scented perfume, you're going to tell me that's jasmine. And perhaps even the flower jasmine might come into your mind. You might recollect the jasmine flower. This is because this is all the associations. So even the smell of jasmine, you are able to give a sanya, the label. Right? And then finally the sankhara. So if it's a flower, you go smell. This is the sankhara. And vijnana is, of course, bringing all that together. So this is what I want you to do now. Let's take some time, and contrary to how we've always seen the world, all our lives we've seen the world as being sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. Actually, no, we've seen it as people, birds, beasts, trees, mother, father, brother, sister, son. This is how we've seen the world. That's how the eye sees the world. That's not how the mind sees the world. So it's like we're learning a new language here. Did you learn a new language anytime lately? Anyone take up French? German? We are now taking up a new language. This language that the mind speaks. Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. So we're looking at the same thing, but we are talking a different language. The eye saw sight, the mind sees Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. So now I want you to reflect on that in the language that the mind speaks. So we'll do that for a little while, and then I have something interesting to show you, which will help you with your meditation. But I'll talk to you about that later. Are you vexing now? It's a very rare video. I'll show it to you later. But now I don't want you to think about it. Okay? Don't think about the video that I'm about to show you. This great video that's so rare, I'm about to show you. Don't think about it, okay? Don't think about it. What I want you to think about is how to read the world in the language of the mind, and that is the 5 aggregates. Are you all clear on what I have asked you to do? Is that all clear? Everyone understand? Great. Okay, let's do that for a little while, and then we'll take it on from there. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. May I and all beings in all worlds be healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. May I and all beings in all worlds be healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. You can open your eyes now. Or should I say you can wake up now? How did you find that? Was that a good dream? For some of you, it might have been the first time in your life you sat down for 45 minutes to focus on one thing with your eyes closed. I never said it was easy. I think except for a handful of you, the vast majority fell foul of the first rule. Which is? Not falling asleep. Letting yourself fall asleep. Sleep comes when it comes. But you can do something about it. Particularly when you start nodding, you know now you have fallen asleep. The first nod can be excused because you didn't see it coming. But the second one, you didn't do anything about it. As with all things, sleep is also the result of causes. When the causes are in its favor, there's no one that can stop the result from manifesting. Sleep is much the same. Have you never fallen asleep in a bus? Have you never fallen asleep standing in a bus? I have. My knees used to bend, and sometimes they would knock the guy in front of me. And then they would shout at me for that. But then, when that happened, there was hardly anything I could do because I was so sleepy, so tired, exhausted. But that was in a bus because I couldn't move about, I couldn't go and wash my face, I couldn't do things about it. So that's what I'm saying. I have nothing against people falling asleep, but I do have a bone to pick with you if you're not doing anything about it. For starters, the environmental factors are not particularly in your favor. We started at 2 o'clock. That's right after lunch. Also, it was quite hot as you came in. And now, yes, the aircon's helping, but still, your body is not accustomed to being alert at this time of day. Your body is accustomed, perhaps for a lot of you, to have a nap at this time of day. That may be what's customary. But these are all excuses. One day or the other, you have to do this. We can put it off. We can say, meditation, do it later. Yeah, but that later has to become today, someday. That later has to become now, someday. Whether you want to do it now, or in 100 years' time, or in 100 births' time, it's going to have to happen. So postponing is not the answer. That's okay, because I expected this to happen. So I'm not disappointed. I set my expectations accurately. But I am not okay with that happening, because I know that is not what you have come here for. And I'm not heartless enough to see that happen to you and be okay with that, because I care. I can be lenient if you like, but that's not going to be of any good to you. So next time, you must do something about it. Sleep will come. I'm not against that. I have nothing against that. There's no grudge against that. Sleep will come. But as I said, I'm not happy with the fact that you let sleep get the better of you. Because as we at the beginning suggested, there are things you can do to fight it. Some of you did, and I admire that. Take a drink of water. Maybe wash your face with some water. Stand up. Walk. If you must go to the washrooms, wash your face, wash your arms, wash your feet. Just liven, freshen yourself up a bit, and that'll do it. Because this is the most important thing you're doing in your entire existence. Listening to the Dhamma and practicing the Dhamma. There's nothing else that is more worthwhile. There will be a lot of you who will have done so much to fight sleep when it was your exams on the line. For your studies, staying up late, with every muscle, with every bit of energy you could muster, you tried to keep awake to study for your exams. But this is a bigger exam. This is the exam that matters at the end of all of it. Because after everything's said and done, the only test paper you're going to answer is, are you a Sotapanna? Are you a Sakrudagami? Are you an Anagami? Are you an Arahat? At that point, it does not matter what other qualifications you have to your name. So you must endure. Be resilient. Remember, this is Mara. This is one face of Mara. Sleep, the Buddha said, is Mara playing games with you. Because when you fall asleep, of course, you're not doing any bad karma. You're not doing any good karma, but your life is passing by. The only chance you had to attain Nibbana is passing by. That is why it's a game of Mara. Sleep. So you mustn't succumb to it. Fight it. I never said it was easy. For some of you, perhaps you were delighted when we concluded the session and said, right, everyone wake up, open your eyes. That goes to show that you were vexing during the session. Come on, wake up already. Say something. Can I open my eyes now? I wanted to do the initial session for 15 minutes, but then I thought, no. Let me help you understand yourself. How much you're vexing. How much you yearn sense inputs. How much you yearn to see around what's going on around you. To hear something. Because when you've closed your eyes and you're in meditation, it's not something you've done before. For the vast majority of you, you've never done it before. Therefore, it's not going to be fun initially. And I admit, because I was much the same. I'm just like you. But I also had a teacher who said, no, I can't let you sleep in my meditation classes. Wake up. So I'm extending that compassionate arm of support to you as well. Do you want me to be okay with you falling asleep? Then I won't. For our listeners online, again, I didn't say a lot before we began because I wanted them to experience this, because there will probably be maybe young children as well as parents listening in, and they might have maybe set up their some kind of meditation postures and so on and so forth. Because a lot of the time people have questions, what's the right postures to sit in? That's why everyone has to start. What's the right posture to sit in? What day of the week is the best for meditation? What is the auspicious time for it? What clothes must I be wearing? These are not the biggest problems. They're nothing, really. You can pick whatever posture you want to sit in. You can wear whatever you like, whatever is comfortable. Doesn't matter. If there's no one at home, be naked for all you like. Doesn't really matter. What matters is your body in a reasonable state whereby it's helping you, it's supporting your mind to reflect on the Dhamma. That's what matters. So for those of our listeners online, if you're in a place where it's a bit noisy, then perhaps that's not a very suitable environment. Find somewhere where it's not going to be noisy. Because what happens is because the mind is always looking, seeking, whenever there are noises coming from the background, the mind is always going to be shifting and switching, tuning in to that station. If you're a parent trying to meditate at home and your children are playing about, making noises, then the brain is always, or the mind is always going to be tuning into those noises. If the TV is on, then your mind's always going to be tuning in. You can't stop it. It just happens naturally. Until you have mastered. With practice it will come. Don't worry. With practice you can meditate anywhere. You can meditate in the middle of the train station. You can go into the fourth jhana for all you like. In the middle of the train station. In the middle of a football stadium while there's a game on. But that comes with practice. But let's not be hasty. First, we must understand ourselves. Understanding yourself involves, step number 1, realize that sleep is not something that happens to your liking. If it did, none of you would ever have trouble falling asleep when you wanted to. Anyone here who's not had sleepless nights? I've never had a sleepless night. Every time I tried, fell asleep, no problem. Anyone? No, whenever there's something worrying, troubling you, you're going to have a sleepless night. So again, sleep is not something that happens to your liking, is it? No, well then same applies here as well. Now you don't want it, but it's not something that happens to your liking. It's going to come when it's going to come. Because when the factors are conducive towards it, then it's going to manifest. So the only thing we can do is change the factors. Play around with the factors, play around with the causes so that that result does not manifest. So when you sprinkle water on your face, that's not supportive towards sleep coming your way because you are freshened up now. When you stand up, chances are less likely you're going to fall asleep. When you're walking up and down, now the blood circulating in your body, your brain's getting more oxygen. So sleep has less of a chance to overcome. This is why I suggested at the beginning, these are some of the steps that you can take. Did you know that Venerable Moggallana, before he became an Arahant, had real trouble staying awake during his meditation sessions? Second chief disciple of the Buddha. What goes for you and I? The second chief disciple of the Supreme Buddha. The Buddha had to go to Moggallana, Thero, and advise him and instruct him. Moggallana, what are you doing? Sai, I can't help it, I'm feeling sleepy. No, don't say you can't help it. Of course you can help it. You're a human being. You can act. You can do something about it. You can change your fate. Act. Stand up. Walk. Wash your face. Rub your ears. There's an entire discourse in the Tripitaka. One of these days I'll get it for you, so you can believe me. Even the great Moggallana, before he became the great Moggallana, as an Arahant, the second chief disciple of the Buddha, he had trouble with meditation. He kept falling asleep, dozing off. And the Buddha gave instruction, but the difference between him and I, or him and us, is that he followed that instruction. Did you? You're lucky I woke you up 15 minutes ago. By now I would have heard someone snoring, if I'd waited another 15 minutes. But listen, I've got nothing against any of you, because as I said, I was in the same place. When we all start meditating, this is new. It's a new experience. It's not something we've done before. What we've done before is watching TV. You don't fall asleep watching TV, do you? When it's a nice movie, an action movie, thriller, romance, whatever you like, then you don't fall asleep. You never fell asleep playing Cluedo, playing a game. No, that's not sleepy. Riding a bike, thankfully, you didn't fall asleep. But this is something you've not done before. So it can be sleepy, it can be boring. This can be the most boring thing you've ever done. It can be. And I understand it. One day this is going to be the most exciting thing in your life. And then waking up from meditation is going to be like, oh, must I? I guarantee there is a day where you will ask, must I get up from my meditation now? Can I not wait another 15 minutes? Do we not have another 15 minutes? Please? You will beg for it. Because there is nothing more peaceful, nothing more relaxing. But that day will come. Let's not be hasty though. But to get there, we must start taking baby steps. And that baby steps involves listening to instruction. So, when sleep comes, don't succumb to it, fight it. Because remember, that's Mara playing games with you. So you won't even feel time passing by. So Vedana is when your mind knows that your senses have just come and delivered. It's just dropped something on the mind. That can be a Sukha Vedana, Dukkha Vedana, or Upeksha Vedana. So it can be pleasurable. It's a sensation. When you've just seen something, and do you find it pleasing to the eye, for instance? Or do you find it painful? You don't like it, it's dissatisfying, or are you still in vexation about it? But this Vedana we're talking about, we are talking about the aggregates. It's not a single Vedana in a mind. We can't perceive at that level. So when we talk about Dukkha Vedana, Sukha Vedana, Adukkama Sukha Vedana, Upeksha Vedana, we're talking about heaps of Vedana which have occurred over a long period of time. A second is a very long period of time. In the land of the mind, a second is an extremely long period of time. So when we see a sight, so there's obviously the Rupa, right? If you took the example of the flower, Rupa, and then there's a Vedana associated with that. That can be a Sukha Vedana, Dukkha Vedana, Upeksha Vedana. Of course, it happens in the mind, in an individual mind as well, but we can't perceive it at that level. We perceive it at the level, at a macroscopic level, when there are heaps of it. Mountains of it. That's why they call the skandha. Kanda, mountain. That's why they're called skandhas or masses. Right? So that's Vedana. Yeah. Now, so what we did there in that 45-minute session is to speak the language of the mind. Yeah? It's as if I gave you a paragraph in a language that you know and asked you to translate it into another language that you also know, but a language you're just learning. So that was what we did there. So you took a paragraph, let's say you're all familiar or fluent in Sinhala, and you're just getting to understand, say, French. I've given you that paragraph, now start translating that into the other language. That's what you did there. All the experiences you've had in your life, or the examples that you remembered, you translated that into Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. So what we are trying to do is actually artificially break this down into the components. But none of them ever appear individually. You never have a moment where it's just Rupa, and Vedana later, Sanya later, Sankara and Vijnana later. That's not how it happens. They all come together, they arise together, and they pass away together. So although we try to simulate this in our minds, that simulation is really not a true reflection of what reality is. But this simulation, this practice helps us to perceive the world, and just helps us to understand the world, comprehend the world in terms of how the mind actually perceives it. But that's not how it actually happens. Actually, it all arises together. Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana, they all arise together and they pass away together. Again arises together and passes away together. That's how it actually happens. What we are trying to do is taking one example, okay, Rupa, what's the Rupa like? What's the Vedana like? What's the Sanya like? What's the Sankara like? What's the Vijnana like? Never happens in the real world like that. But we can't reflect on all 5 of them at one moment. Right? We won't be able to do that. Therefore, we break it down bit by bit, understanding fully well that that's not how it happens in reality. In reality, they all arise together and they pass away together. Okay. So, here's what we're going to do next. Apart from trying to not fall asleep, okay? What we're trying to do now, what we're going to be doing next is, having reflected on the world as being Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana, we all understand and know now that the reason we talk about Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana is because it's the mind's language. If I were talking about a bottle, I wouldn't be talking about Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. What's the relationship between the bottle and the mic? I wouldn't be talking about Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. Because this doesn't have a mind, this doesn't have a mind, so they don't have, they may be communicating in some way, I don't know. Probably the bottle's talking to the mic. Hey, how you doing? Are you having a good day? I don't know. Can we say they're not? We just don't know. Trees may be talking with each other. We don't know. The reason we talk about Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana is because that's how our mind understands everything in the world. Right? So this is how this is the language our mind speaks. Now, the nature of our mind is that it arises and passes away. Why does it arise? Because conditions. When the conditions are conducive to its arising, it arises. And when those conditions prevail, then the mind lasts for that duration of time. And when the conditions cease to exist, the mind will pass away. Now that's the mind arising and passing away, and this is obviously a model. This is not the real mind. That's how it works. This is a model, and I'm pointing out with my finger. And Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana come and take seat in the mind. So with the mind they arise, with the mind they pass away. With the mind they arise again, and with the mind it passes away. Like those wheels in carnivals. What do you call them? Ferry wheels. Like a ferry wheel. So when you're sat on a ferry wheel, and if the ferry wheel's going up, if you're sat on it, can you go down? If it's going clockwise, can you go anti-clockwise? No, because you're the passenger in the vehicle, and the vehicle's going forward, so you've got no choice but to go forward. So likewise, when Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana are the passengers in this vehicle, then as it arises, you have no choice. They have no choice but to arise. And when it passes away, now again, Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana have no choice but to pass away. It's not like they've got anything against you. They're not like, oh, let's vex this guy, so let's pass away. They've got nothing against you. It's the fact you've got a mind that rises and passes away. It's your fault. It's our problem, because we have a mind that arises and passes away with conditions. Right? Therefore, Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana, they have got nothing, they're helpless. They arise when the mind arises, they pass away when the mind passes away. So that's okay, because even in an Arahant, that's what happens. But we have a problem with that. The problem we have is what? What's the problem we have? Attachment. Because our minds are attached to Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. The only language that the mind speaks, these words, these ideas, whatever the mind can perceive, the mind is attached to. Now there's a problem. Because when something passes away and you're still attached to it, that leaves you in suffering. Really simple example would be someone in your family passed away. While you still liked them, loved them, were attached to them, how did you feel? Someone you didn't like, someone you weren't attached to particularly, someone you didn't even know of, passed away. Couldn't care less, right? That's how an arahant is. Couldn't care less. He couldn't care less about Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana passing away. But don't they pass away? Of course, in his mind also, it's the same phenomenon. Except with ourselves, we have a mind that is always attaching. And it's because of attachment, we feel this vexation. Now at this point, I'm going to show you this video. So this is a very rare video. It took us a lot of time to find this and put this together. In this video, you will be able to realize how much human beings vex, right? How much you vex as a human being. With every moment, how much you vex, you'll be able to observe in this video. You'll also hear some familiar voices, Stephen Hawking, right? Great scientists who have come and gone in our time, and some of their thoughts about some of this stuff in this material. But above all, you'll be able to understand vexation. You'll be able to really understand vexation. It's a very rare video. I doubt you're going to be able to find it anywhere. So if you're interested, you can pick it up from Dasahandru later on. But that's for later. But what I want you to do now is really watch this and pay a close attention and try and learn what you can from this video.
Here we are on a planet which is about 5,000 million years old. It is part into
can ask questions about the beginning of the universe.
We observe that distant galaxies are moving away from us. This means that
That was the video. I have just proved to you that you vex like hell. Gotcha. I did tell you it was a rare one. I did tell you you're not going to find it anywhere else. We should have played that on the 1st of April. Did that give you a glimpse into your own mind? And how much we vex? That was all recorded. There was nothing wrong with the laptop. Did I not deliver on my promise? What are the things I said? It was going to be a very rare video. I said you would hear Stephen Hawking's voice, which, of course, I delivered on all my promises. I said it was going to help you understand how humanity suffers so much because of vexation. I said if you watch this video carefully, you're going to be able to understand how much you vex. Have I not delivered? I've delivered everything I promised. So you can't say I'm unfair. You're welcome. I think that's more right. But it was really to help you understand how your minds operate. You know, it's just a blue screen, you can't sit watching it. You're wondering what's going on. Why? Because your mind is always looking, you've already formulated something in your mind. You've already set an expectation. This is what I want to watch. When I said Stephen Hawking, when I said it was a rare video, great video, you're saying, this has to be something groundbreaking, news material stuff, something really exciting. You've already set that expectation. Ultimately, you've set an expectation on Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankhara Vijnana. Now you're waiting for that to come your way, and you're watching this, but it's not coming. And when it did come, it passed away immediately. Because there were flashes where you did actually see proper video material, right? But then it passed away. How did that make you feel? Also, how did it make you feel when you actually got to see some of the video? Did you not feel excited? Yes, we actually get to see something now. This is how the mind is constantly. That was only 2.5 minutes long. 2.5 minutes of footage can vex you so much. Now, when you understand and you know that with every passing moment, your mind is arising and passing away. Because this is actually the outside Rupa, the outside world arising and passing away. But this is actually happening on the inside. This is what we need to understand. Right? Apply what you've seen here on the inside world, where your mind is arising and passing away at that rate. Sorry, at an even faster rate. At that rate, you can't bear it. Now increase that many million times faster, billion times faster. All because of attachment. I was meditating one day, it was an idea that came to mind. What if? And then I thought, nah, that's very mean. Then I thought, nah, we should do this. And here's the output. But hopefully it helped you to really understand how your minds work. So now that vexation has come alive for you, and you really have been able to experience that, this is what I want you to reflect on now. So for the next part of our meditation session, this session we're going to do now. Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankhara Vijnana, we looked at the world as being the 5 aggregates in the previous attempt or the previous session. Now what we're going to do is reflect on how they arise and pass away in the mind. And that's perfectly fine. But when you attach yourself to the 5 aggregates, now when they pass away, how that leaves your mind in a state of extreme vexation. We must reflect on how we are the creators, we are the architects of our own suffering. We put ourselves into the lurch. We dig our own graves because of attachment. The moment you stop your attachment, you can watch that without any problem. Now the second time you can watch it no problem. Why? Because now you have no expectations. Or your expectation is what you just saw a moment ago. If you watch it a second time, so this video you actually can't watch a second time. It's not going to give you the same effect. Because now you know what to expect. So that you will expect. It's not that you have no expectations. Now this is what you will expect. So therefore, you'll be fine with that. Constantly building expectations, then waiting for the expectation to materialize, and then once it passes away, your expectations are shattered, you're left with vexation. We put ourselves into this situation. You still have expectation, because now you know what to expect, so you're now expecting that. So the video with its blue screens and the short seconds of video footage, this is what you're expecting now. So now you're waiting. So if I were to play that video a second time, that is what you're expecting. So if something else is shown to you, then you're going, that's not what I saw the first time. Have you changed the video again? Again, there's going to be conflict. So if we play that a second time, and you are now seeing what you're now expecting, that's going to bring you ashvada. That is going to bring you pleasure. But with that pleasure there, we're talking about at a very grand level. Because if you actually boil it down to every chitta, it's still again, the mind just wants rupa vedana sanya sankhara vijnana. Because even though you know what to expect now we're talking about a 2.5 minute video. But if you take one individual chitta, one thought, one mind moment, still all it needs is rupa vedana sanya sankhara vijnana, and that's passing away. Yeah, absolutely. And it's still vexing. So really, even if I showed you a second time, you're still going to be vexing. At the macro level, you may not be, because you know what to expect. But at the micro level, when you take one chitta, of course you're vexing. Why? Because you still want rupa vedana sanya sankhara vijnana. And that is passing away with every thought. Did you understand that? With every thought, that's passing away. So we're talking about two different things here, from two angles. One is the movie, or the video clip. First, you didn't know what to expect. But you had an expectation, based on what I said. See, this is what I gave you drushti. I was responsible for giving you the drushti, and then in your mind, you thought of it as being pleasurable, and joyful, and essence-full. Ashvadai sapai sarhai. Because that was the drushti I gave you, right? It's a great video, you must watch it. Right? So with all that, you're taking on this view that this is a must-watch video clip. And even I said, if you want, you can collect it from Dasahandru after on. Right? So with all those words, you've created this fantasy world in your mind. Now that you expect. But that's at a really grand level. If you take it down to the microscopic level, with every chitta, that's still all the chitta wants is rupa vedana sanya sankhara vijnana. And that's passing away regardless. Even if you now watch the video a second time or a third time or even the 100th time, you're still vexing. Why? Because the mind just wants rupa vedana sanya sankhara vijnana. Whether it's seen it before or not is irrespective. It's the view that someone gives you. It's their perspective they give to you. And then if you take that perspective on, then it's kind of like being brainwashed. So I tell you something, and if you take it on, so what I tell you is the drushti. If you accept it, now that drushti has become your drushti. It's your view, your perspective, your worldview. And then you accept it and you think, okay, now that is how the world is to be. You base your worldview on that. I gave you the material that you needed to create attachment, because attachment is with you, because of ignorance. I didn't give you ignorance. Ignorance is with you. Because you're ignorant, I can delude you. Right? Because you're ignorant, I can delude you by saying all sorts of things. If you weren't ignorant, if you didn't have avidya, then no matter what I say, yes, I couldn't have influenced you. Then you could have watched that, no problem. If there were an actual video clip 2.5 minutes long, so what? You would still have taken something from it. But even if it was just a blue screen throughout the video, you'd be okay with that. Of course, you might ask me later on, was there a problem, a technical problem? Was there a technical problem? If let's say you were an arahant, you might come and ask me, Swaminatha, was there a technical problem? I say, no, that was the video. Okay. Internally, there's absolutely no vexation. But when something's not right, an arahant would be able to perceive that. So, for example, if I'm speaking over the microphone, right? And my voice is starting to sound chirpy, or if the audio quality is going bad, as an arahant, you would pick up on that. And if it was your job, the day the Asahandra becomes an arahatunans, and he's still there doing that job, he's still going to go and adjust the microphone. Because something's not right. But that's not to say he's vexing inside internally. Without vexation, he's able to fix the problem. But when we are vexing, now the problem's my problem. That is the difference. An Arahatun Mahanse will still deal with problems, of course. I think I told you last time when the Buddha, you weren't there. The Buddha gave the Pratimoksha when he was giving the discipline to his monks. In the first 20 years of his dispensation, we must really get back to our meditation. In the first 20 years of his dispensation, there was what is called the Ovada Pratimoksha. So that was just advice, very brief advice. There are 3 stanzas that he recited. Kanti paramant apotitikka nibbanam paramang vadanti Buddha. I think you will have heard that when you come along to the meditation sessions. Guru Swami Mahanse recites that at the end of the program. Right? So that was the Ovada Pratimoksha. So this was the advice to the monks he gave according to this discipline, or this instruction, discipline yourself. On one occasion, when the Buddha had convened his monks to give this Ovada Pratimoksha, one of the monks in the so all the high ordained monks, before they go along to this convention, they have to confess. So we have what we call the Avat Desima. High ordained monks would, every so often they go through this process. It's like a confession. It's like when you go to the church, right? You have a confession box and you confess. Similarly, in Buddhist tradition, for Buddhist monks, there's such a practice. So we cleanse ourselves by sharing with another high ordained monk what faults we've done, and then we cleanse ourselves. So practice is that when the Buddha comes to give the Ovada Pratimoksha, every monk in there has to have confessed their wrongdoings before having come and taken seat. But there was one monk on this one particular day who had not done so. So he was not clean. He had not cleansed himself by doing the confession. Now, of course, everyone's waiting for the Buddha to start giving the instruction, but the Buddha remains silent. So he comes along for the afternoon and he's silent. He's just waiting. So everyone's wondering what's going on. And then it's evening. He's not saying a word. It's night, not saying a word. It's the following morning. Everyone's just sat waiting for the Buddha to start giving instruction, but he's not saying a word. Because of course, there's nothing you can hide from the Buddha. So he knows when someone's not done what they ought to have done. And then finally, someone asks, Venerable Sir, why is it you are not preaching the instruction? And he says, because there's one among you who has not done their confessions before coming along. And then the Buddha points out, it's that person over there. So this monk, he resists. He says, no, I'm not. I don't want to leave. I'm clean, I'm pure, I don't want to leave. But the Buddha says, no, I'm not going to start until you have left. So on 3 occasions, I think the Buddha asks this person to leave gracefully, but he doesn't. So what the great elder Moggallana, who was an arahant at the time, does, he stands up, goes and holds the monk by his neck and pulls him out of the audience and says, don't you ever come back here again. Now you wouldn't expect an arahant to do that, because this is, your interpretation of how an arahant would operate is an arahant would not do that. But no, this is what I'm trying to prove to you. When something's not right, an arahant would try to put it right. Not because they're vexing, because that is what, there's a right and a wrong. There's what has to happen. There's the right way to do something. And an arahant would do what he can, what is acceptable, in order to make the system operate properly. So on that occasion, that is what he did. Did he acquire any bad merits bad karma by doing that? Because there was no vexation. Did he earn any good merits by doing that? No, neither. So this is why I say there's right and wrong, but right and wrong is not, compared to Nibbana, there's no right and wrong. Compared to social customs and how we live and operate, there's right and wrong. Decorum. The things we do and the things that we don't do. The done things and the not done things. Right? For example, if you are yawning in the middle of an audience, you cover your mouth. If you cough, you cover your mouth, or maybe have to take a handkerchief. Is that a good karma or a bad karma? Neither. But that's decorum. It's just how we operate in society. Good manners. So these things, even an arahant would abide by. So an arahant would clean his quarters and keep it clean and tidy. Wash his robes, shave. Is that good karma or bad karma? Neither. But that's how you have to operate. So in that video, when there were instances where it seemed like the setup was not working, the configuration was erroneous, even an arahant might, if it were his job to address it, he might go up and fix it. But you can't give me that excuse because it's not your job to fix it. Which is what most of you were doing. Looking at him, looking at the screen. Looking at him, looking at the screen. Looking at him, then looking at the screen again. So you didn't follow my instruction. Right, so here's what we're going to do now. For the next portion of this session, what I want you to reflect on is, now having reflected on Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, and that is how we read the world out there, I want you to reflect on how Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana arises in the mind and passes away along with the mind. And that is okay. And the fact that it's okay, that's how it happens. But because of attachment, when the Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana passes away, we are left with vexation. And then when again Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana arises, now that vexation is being relieved, therefore you experience pleasure. So really, in summary, what I want you to reflect on is, what is the source of vexation? What is the source of pleasure? Where does it come from? Where does vexation come from? Where does pleasure come from? Our wrong view tells us that pleasure and vexation come from Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, but that is not the truth. Vexation comes from having set an expectation. Now that expectation has not been delivered, therefore you start vexing. Pleasure comes from the fulfillment of an expectation. That's all it is. So that can be observed in the arising and the passing away of a mind, of each chitta. Of course, we can't see individual chittas, but we can reflect on that as being the reality. So I want you to contemplate on that. What is the source of vexation and what is the source of pleasure? And how they are both to do with the arising and passing away of the mind and the Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana that arise with and pass away with the mind. Is that clear to everyone? Is that clear to everyone? Good. So let's do that for a few minutes, and then we'll do the merit transfer, and we'll have to call it today because we've only got another half an hour left. Time flies. So please be honest to yourselves. Don't let sleep get the better of you. Don't make the same mistake twice. Yeah? Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Here with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. May I and all beings and all worlds be here with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Here with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Here with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. May I and all beings in all worlds be here with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Here with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Okay. You may open your eyes now. Performed much better than last time. Well done. Let's do a quick recap before we conclude then. So first off, what we did today in today's session was to try to speak the language of the mind, to interpret all our experiences in terms of Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana, the five aggregates. Because no matter how we try to express using language, words, pictures, whatever, ultimately the mind only speaks one language, and that is the only way the mind can perceive the world, and that is through Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. So the quicker that we can learn to interpret the world in that language, the quicker that we will learn to understand how the mind works, how the mind sees the world. Because ultimately it's the mind that attaches to the world. It's not the eye, not the ear, not the nose, nor tongue or body. None of our sense organs have any attachments to any of these worldly things. It's the mind that always attaches. And the mind can only attach to something that it knows. You can't attach to something you don't know of. You can only attach to something you know. Mind only knows the five aggregates, therefore that's all the mind can attach to. So that's what we first reflected on. And then in the second session, you reflected on how the nature of the mind is to arise and pass away. And like passengers in a vehicle, this Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana, we take seat in the mind, arise and pass away with the mind. And then you got to watch the video, and through that video you were able to understand this in a practical sense, in a practical way. If you really break down what we did with that experiment, is first I gave you a drushti. This is the whole process, start to end. First I gave you a drushti. It was a view that the Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana you are about to get is pleasurable, joyful and essenseful. Ashvadai, Sapai, Sarai. So I gave you that drushti. But you are ignorant. Therefore, you will readily accept whatever I have to say. So don't blame me. Fix your ignorance. Then I can't do anything to influence you. For as long as you're ignorant, it could be anything I show up here. And I'll tell you it's pleasurable. And you will take it. This is what happened, right? So I gave you the drushti first to begin with. This is how everything has happened in your entire life. Everything you attach to, first you were given a view, a drushti. Someone gave you that drushti. Then Now you're attached to it because you see them as being pleasurable, joyful, and essence-full. And as soon as you are attached to it, now you're vexing for it because you don't have it now. It's not there. So the only sensation, the only feeling you can experience now is vexation. You can't experience pleasure yet because it hasn't come yet. So now you're vexing. So you were vexing right until the video got started to play. And then the video started to play. Now, these Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, which in your mind you have already deemed as being pleasurable, joyful, and essence-full, are starting to come in. So you were waiting for them to come. You were waiting for that delivery. So now the postman knocked on the door. Here you go. Because you were waiting for it, you were vexing for it, and now you are being relieved from that vexation. Not because the Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana is joyful, essenseful, or pleasurable. It's because you were waiting for it, you were yearning for it, you were longing for it. Yeah? And then Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana started to flood in, but a moment later, stopped. The Rupa you were expecting, you didn't get to see. The Rupa you were expecting, you didn't get to hear. Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, likewise. What you were expecting, you weren't receiving. So again, you go back into, it's passed away, now you want it again, but it's not there. So back to vexation. Because again, even the video arose and passed away. It passed away, leaving attachment with you in your mind. So you're still attached to it. You're still thinking of it as being pleasurable, joyful, and essenseful, but stuff isn't coming. So now you're vexing. And then a moment later, start to come back again. Relief from vexation. Yes, finally got it. Again got it. Now again joy, pleasure. But it wasn't the Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara. It wasn't the video that brought you pleasure. If it were, I show it to you second time. You must feel exactly the same way. If I showed you third time, if I showed you the 100th time, you should feel exactly the same way. You should feel that joy in exactly the same way. But if I showed you a second time, a third time, like, yeah, okay, enough, we get it now. So it can't be the video that brought you pleasure, can it? Because if it were, the more times I show it, the more times you have to feel pleasure. But it's not the video then. So pleasure was completely a concoction that happened on the inside. It was a fabrication on the inside. Your fantasy world. That's what it was. So, of course, that was happening on the outside, arising and passing away. But what I said was apply that same concept, that same phenomenon onto the inside world, where here it's a video arising and passing away, but even when the video is being seen, you can still see the video. On the inside, the mind is still arising and passing away at a much quicker rate. And that's when I said, if the mind were arising and passing away at that rate, well, imagine what it would be like at 1 billion times faster than that. So we reflected on that. What is the source of pleasure and what is the source of vexation? And how it's because of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana taking seat in a mind that arises and passes away with attachment, you have to endure this pain. So that is what we reflected on. So that was the second part of the meditation program. I'd like to do more, but we don't have time. But that's okay. Like I said, we don't have to run. Let's take baby steps first. Did you find today's session worthwhile? Did you find that you learned something about how your mind works and really applying this practically? So reflect on this then. I think what would be useful is really, if you can set aside 15 minutes every day. There may be some among you who are much more fortunate where you can put more time aside. But if I had to ask you for a favor, really not helping me but helping you, put 15 minutes aside every day. 15 minutes, not more. 15 minutes. 15 minutes aside. And just reflect on what we did in today's program. Nothing else. Nothing else. Nothing complicated. Something really simple. Interpret the world as Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. And then look at how Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana become part of you. In a mind that arises and passes away. And then with attachment, you go through vexation. And then when you are released from vexation, you experience pleasure. If you can set aside 15 minutes every day to just reflect on that, you will be able to do wonders. I guarantee. You'll be able to achieve wonders. Because when your mind realizes, ultimately all that needs to happen is your mind has to realize this. When the mind begins to accept that no matter what I look at, what I listen to, what I turn my senses around to, ultimately all I receive is Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, which I have to receive in a basket that arises and passes away. And what is the point? What is the point then? This is why Guru Swaminatha says, take a bit of chocolate and wrap it around your tongue, put a sellotape over it, but still it rises and passes away. So what's the point then? For as long as you're attached to it, there's going to be non-stop vexation. So when your mind begins to realize that, then the mind's going to stop looking for all these sense impressions. It's going to stop looking for stuff, and it's going to be content. See, real contentment comes from this. Contentment is bliss. Real contentment comes from realizing that there's no point in going after all this stuff. That's when you become content, not by forcing yourself to be content. Forcing yourself to be content is not bliss. You want to watch TV, I'm not going to watch TV. I'm just not going to watch TV. You think that's bliss? Someone serves you chocolate cake. You've eaten, you say, no, I'm going to be content. I've had my dinner, I'm not going to have this chocolate cake. Or maybe just a little bit. That's not bliss. That's burning on the inside. But when you realize there's nothing to be gained, nothing essential to be gained from this, now you will be content. You can't force yourself to be content. That's not contentment. Contentment comes naturally. That is Nibbana. So 15 minutes, if you can put aside every day to practice this, I promise you, you will be able to do wonders. I can't ask you to do this several hours a day because I know you have busy lives. There may be some among you who can afford to do so, and if so, do so. But for others who are pressed for time, just find 15 minutes and make it a regular 15-minute slot at the same time every day, and also pick a time in which you know your body is in a fit state for it. So, like right after lunch is a great time to meditate, isn't it? No. So don't pick that slot then. First thing in the morning is a really good time. Some people are morning people, others are night people. You decide. For some, night is the best time. For others, it's the morning. You pick the right time for it. But try and find a time where there are not a lot of distractions. Right? So if you're a mother, parent, maybe try and find a time when your kids are not at home or they're busy doing their homework. Right? Then you have a little bit of time where you can reflect on that. Because when you have lots of distractions, at this early stage, the mind is always trying to jump. Because it's looking for Vedana Sanya. Always jumping, like a monkey, jumping from one tree to another. So at this early stage, create that, at least artificially, create that environment which is conducive to your practice. Later on, when your practice becomes much more tuned, when your practice becomes much more perfected, then you can pretty much do it anywhere. But let's not rush, one step at a time. So, give your feedback not to me, but to, I think, Ms. Algola, who organized the cohort, and see if this kind of session is useful. If so, we can maybe try it another time and see how it goes. To me, it's either way, because I get my meditation time anyway, but if this is good practice for you, then we can continue this. But this continuing will only reap fruit if you actually do it every day. So find that 15 minutes. I'm not asking for much, just 15 minutes. You might feel, actually, I'm going to do it for half an hour. No, don't. Just start with 15 minutes. Otherwise, you're going to get fed up. When you can manage your first 15 minutes, you'll feel really glad about it. You'll feel those feel-good hormones kicking in. Oh, yes, I did it. You can, when you tick that box, I did it. You're going to feel great about it. So first do what's possible. It has to be smart, has to be realistic, achievable. Once you get that done, then over time we'll practice, we'll increase the time, the duration, and then you can do it freely and whenever you want to. But first 15 minutes. Okay, so I'm conscious of time, so we'll bring the session to a close. Before that, I want to do the Arya Maitreya, particularly at this difficult time. I think we all have a duty. All our monks, ever since we heard what was going on out there, every day we did, alongside our meditation sessions, every meditation session we closed with Arya Maitreya. Because while people out there are taking arms, we took arms as well. And our arms is Arya Maitreya. This is the weapon that the Buddha gave us. So we extended Arya Maitreya to everyone. Because I know that we had a meditation program last week as well. So some of you were there in the program. I couldn't believe, I simply couldn't imagine how you could be here when all of that is going on out there. How could you maintain that peace of mind to be here when your families are out there? That really speaks volumes. So it was a great achievement for those of you who endured that week and stayed here when things were going on out there. And also, for people like yourselves who still continue to bring alms to the monastery, right? When everyone was saying stay indoors, don't get out, and still, the dedication with which you acted is really something. So what we did at the monastery did what we can as monks, is we spread the Arya Maitreya. We're thinking about all of you, your families, people we left behind in our lay lives, everyone, every citizen in this country. We spread the Arya Maitreya to all of them in the hope that may their hearts be placated with this compassion in a time where people are really struggling out there. So let's do the Arya Maitreya for a few minutes and spread that compassion to all beings, particularly our fellow citizens of the country at this difficult time, both friend and foe, because we don't have foes in this journey. Remember, we don't have foes. Remember what I said to you about a couple of weeks ago? We all get what we deserve. Some of you didn't like to hear me say that, but that is the truth. We all get what we deserve. Karma, vipaka. Ignorance and attachment are the only foes we have. No one else is a foe. We don't have enemies except for ignorance and attachment. These are the only enemies. So no matter what side of the battle they're on, ultimately they're all helpless, innocent people, human beings. The world might say, no, they're not innocent. But when you look at it from a perspective of Nibbana, everyone's innocent. Because no one really knows the gravity of the problem that they're in. Because everyone's trying to fix the outside world, not realizing that the whole problem is inside of them. How fortunate are you? So let's spread that compassion to all sentient beings in the hope that may they be able to uncover this, may they be able to discover this ultimate bliss and experience the bliss of Nibbana that you are able to experience. Okay. May all men and women, wherever they may be, all our fellow citizens, wherever they may be, friend or foe, whose hearts may be burning with hatred, anger, frustration, resentment, aversion, find the bliss of Nibbana. May all their hearts be drenched with this infinite compassion that we have all expounded towards them. May all beings in all worlds attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Okay. Make the Arya Maitri a daily practice, ladies and gentlemen. It's absolutely essential. You need it, the country needs it. We all have a part to play. This is our part. The way we play it, everyone's a winner. The way others play it, they win and someone else loses. But not in the Arya Vinaya. The way of the Aryans, everyone's a winner. So spread Arya Maitri every moment you can. When you're on the bus, when you're in your car, driving around, you see people, helpless people, destitute, in despair, with so much anger, sometimes fear, burning on the inside. I can't imagine how people must be living out there. I have the safety of the monastery, but you, sometimes I can't even begin to imagine. Because you're not arahants yet. At least as far as I know. So when you're out there, every step you take outside your home. So spread the Arya Maitri as much as you possibly can. At least you have the gift of Dhamma, but all those people out there, they have no hope. But with every time you spread the Arya Maitri, you would contemplate on that. There's positive energy that you give out, which heals other people's hearts and souls. That is what you and I can do in this difficult time. Not taking weapons. This is our weapon. Our arms is Arya Maitri. So practice it. We all have a part to play. Let's play our part. Okay. So let's transfer our merits and we will conclude the sermon. First and foremost, let us take a moment once again to reflect on the fact that it is because of the supremely enlightened Buddha, the perfect one, the omniscient one, the infinitely compassionate one, that we have the gift of Dhamma today. Let's also take a moment to transfer merits to the Bhikkhu, Bhikkhunis, Upasaka, Upasikas, who since time immemorial, all the way down through the generations, passed on the gift of Dhamma in the form of the Tripitaka, all the way down to us. It is thanks to them that today we have the Tripitaka that we can study, analyze, understand and comprehend to enable us to attain Nibbana. So may they all be able to rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. Let us also take a moment to remind ourselves of all the members of the Mahasangha, wherever they may be in this world, as well as the monks and nuns in your local temples and in your local nunneries, although you have come along today to this monastery to practice the Dhamma, to meditate and so on and so forth. Do not forget for a moment that it is the members of the Mahasangha who are resident in your local temples, who have always been by your side through thick and thin, come rain or shine, always been by your side to guide you, to assist you, to show you the path in life. Let us all take a moment to reflect on the service they have all rendered to us, and with that gratitude in heart, let us all transfer merits to them. May through the power of these merits they all be able to abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the Noble Eightfold Path, and attain the Supreme Bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to the Devas, Brahmas, spirits, demons, and the dead that are always with us, who rejoice in these meritorious deeds, and who seek the merits in order that they may be able to attain the Supreme Bliss of Nibbana. So may they all be able to rejoice in these merits, as well as all those beings who will have come past in samsara, in whichever shape, way or form, as mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, nephews, nieces, so on and so forth. Those of your ancestors who have predeceased you, wherever they may be, if any of them have today been born in the woeful planes, may through the power of these merits they be able to redeem themselves from those woeful planes and be born in the blissful planes. And may through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the Noble Eightfold Path, and attain the Supreme Bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer merits to all the members of the armed forces who have dedicated their lives to protecting and preserving our motherland, as well as members of the police force who are rendering a remarkable service in these difficult times. May they all be able to rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today, as well as those men and women and children who might have lost their lives in the recent calamities. May they all be able to rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. May through the power of these merits, if any of them have today been born in the woeful planes, be able to redeem themselves and be born in the blissful planes. May through the power of these merits, they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, may through the course of all the merits that we have all acquired today, we be able to witness the advent of many hundreds of thousands of Arahatun Mahanses in this blessed land in our very lives itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, make a firm resolve that may you and I and everyone who have contributed to making this event a success, who have joined us in any way, shape or form, whom perhaps might have just passed on their blessings to us, may we all be able to become one of those Arahatun Mahanses, be able to become one of those Arahat Mehenin Mahanses in this very birth itself and in the era of the Gautama Supreme Buddha itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. The members of the Mahasangha will now transfer their blessings to you. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of desire. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of aversion. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fires of delusion. May I and all beings in all worlds attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. May the noble triple gem be with you all, always. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.